Hi, Sunday School class members. My name is Martine Kalau, and I am just so honored to be part of this conversation with you. Happy Sunday. I am an author, Huffington Post blogger in the area of immigration, an inspirational speaker, and I am a learning and development consultant for corporations such as industries in private aviation, retail, and technology. But most importantly, I spent 13 years of my life as an undocumented immigrant. And at that time, we were just referred to as illegal immigrants. And of those 13 years, I spent 7 years in deportation proceedings. So from the time that I was 20 to the time that I was 27, I was going to hearings and trials and faced the possibility of being placed in a detention facility indefinitely, primarily because I didn't have a country that I could call home. Now, my story is a cautionary tale of what could happen, or what is probably happening already, to the thousands of undocumented youth who don't have a path to citizenship because DACA is no longer a possibility and the DREAM Act is no longer a possibility. People have asked me, Martine, how did you end up being undocumented? I don't understand. Why couldn't you get citizenship? Well, the short answer is I was a product of circumstances beyond my control. Certainly and surely you understand how that goes. Sometimes, especially as children, things happen. Our parents make decisions that affect and impact us in a big way, and we have no control. So let me take you on a quick journey down memory lane so that you can understand the context of my situation. I came to the U.S. at the age of 4 years old on a temporary visa with my mother. I was born in Lusaka, Zambia. My mother was from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, also known as Zaire at the time. So I came on her passport as a tiny little picture on the last page of her passport with my name scribbled in, almost like an afterthought. And so I came in 1985 to the United States, and my mother's mindset was, I want to come to the U.S. and bring my youngest child, but I have 6 other children in Congo, and once I get established, I will bring them here too and save them, because at the time and currently, Congo is still stricken by civil unrest. So my mother found love and remarried. She married an American-born citizen. I gained a wonderful stepfather. I didn't even see him or think of him as a stepfather. For all intents and purposes, he was my father. So that's why life was particularly difficult and tragic when we lost him when I was 13 years old. He died, and my mother was a permanent resident at the time, so life was difficult because she was working so hard to try to bring her other children to the United States. She was applying for her U.S. citizenship, and she was also becoming ill. And when I turned 15, my mother passed away. Shortly thereafter, I was grappled with the guilt that my mother's family inflicted on me, which was, Martine, how could you not have known that your mother had full-blown AIDS and your stepfather had HIV? You could have saved them. It's because of you that your mother is dead. So I share that with you because I want you to understand my mindset. While I was dealing with all these other challenges of being an orphan, and then falling into a situation with my immigration status. So for 2 years after my mother died, I was tossed from home to home and dealing with abuse in each of those homes. Finally, a stranger, by the grace of God, I believe and know, realized or made a decision that she needed to get me out of my situation. So a series of fortunate happenstances occurred that I ended up in boarding school. It was my safe haven. And after boarding school is when the question of my status arose. I was looking to go to college, and we needed to obtain a new Social Security card because my other Social Security card, my non-working Social Security card, was lost. So we went to the Social Security Administration the first time and asked about, how we could apply for a new Social Security card. And they said, well, she has a non-working card. We're not sure what her status is. This was back in 1999. We can't help you. And so we left it alone. I applied to colleges. I got into Hamilton College in upstate New York, and the school was committed to helping me establish my status, and I was awarded private donor scholarships at the time. So when I was in college in my first year, my freshman year, and I got a job to just pay for, just the basics, the fundamentals of, or needs that a 19 or 20 something year old would need, just basic cash. I was working, I needed to work, I worked for the Dean of Faculty's office, but we definitely needed a working Social Security card so I could actually get paid. So me and one of our school administrators went to the Social Security Administration for the second time and presented to them, my situation. Here I was, we didn't know what my status was, and we needed to get me a working Social Security card. What should we do? And it's almost like we handed them my status. We handed them my situation on a platter, saying, hey, put her in deportation proceedings, because that's what happened immediately thereafter. I was placed in deportation proceedings, and for a series of 7 years, I was dealing with going to these master calendar hearings, not having an identification. So it's like catch-22, because in order to actually travel, take public transportation to get to those hearings, I needed ID. I didn't have one, with the exception of my school ID, which wasn't a government-issued ID. And this was during 9/11, where, not having an identification was really scary, because the government and the Department of Homeland Security were doing sweeps in public transportation, in buses, at airports, because they were looking for terrorists. And so people like myself, who didn't have ID and ran the risk of being caught, quote unquote, had to keep a low profile. So I really felt like a fugitive. Even though I was in deportation proceedings, I was even more afraid of being put directly into jail if I was caught without an ID, taking public transportation. So my community stepped in, my college community, my prep school community stepped in to support me in getting to those hearings. They also stepped in to support me to find, to reach out to Congress members, to senators, to see if there was a path to citizenship for me. There wasn't. I exercised all possibilities, and there absolutely was not an avenue for me. Not to mention, I was also stateless. So I learned that my country of origin, my birth country, Zambia, would not recognize me as a citizen. And my mother's birth country did not recognize me as a citizen. So I had no home. And the mentality that I carried was that I didn't exist because I didn't have parents. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a country. So I was a nobody. And every time I stepped into that courtroom, I was reminded of the nobody that I was. I had a pro bono attorney who did his best work to support me, but he was inundated with cases. And so my case was not the top priority. He made some egregious mistakes in putting together my brief and representing me. He actually presented evidence to the court in the 11th hour, which further angered the judge. I remember the judge's words like it was yesterday. He said, Martine, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself because you're presenting evidence. You made up lies, and you're presenting this evidence in my courtroom in the 11th hour. You're making a mockery out of my courtroom. You deserve to be deported. So from that experience, I became traumatized. I was traumatized by the judge. I was traumatized by the procedure. I was traumatized by the master calendar hearings. I was traumatized by the trials that I had to go to. My case was remanded, was funneled up to the Board of Immigration Appeals, the highest immigration court, and they're located in Falls Church, Virginia, twice, and it was remanded back to the judge, and the judge would send it back to the Board of Immigration Appeals. So I was in limbo. I was dealing with a lot of psychological ramifications, and there were many times where I wanted to give up. There were actually many times where I tried to give up on my life. I tried to end my life, and I really believe that God was punishing me for whatever reason. In 2007, my life changed because the Board of Immigration Appeals read my case. They saw it, and they saw me, right, behind all that paperwork. And they wrote a 6-page response to my immigration judge saying, this girl has been through enough. She's been through abuse, poverty, neglect, tragedy, and she deserves a green card. She deserves a path to citizenship. Now, I was told that the response that I got from the Board of Immigration Appeals was like 1 out of 1,000. They seldom have the opportunity, because they have so many cases, they seldom have the opportunity or the chance to go through files and read actual cases. So my situation was, I don't know, you can call it luck, you might refer to it as a randomness of life. I don't know what it was. But what I can tell you is the thousands of other undocumented youth who are going through what I went through may not have the same chances that I have. Not all of them will have those chances. So unless there's a path to citizenship, then more people are going to be they're subject to dealing with and going through what I went through, and they will go through it indefinitely. So many of us think that, you know, deportation happens overnight, right? Let's deport these individuals, send them back to where they come from. But the question lies in, well, what if where they come from doesn't acknowledge them? You know, their home is America. They grew up in the United States. They refer to the U.S. as their home. So what if there isn't a country that they can go back to? What if there isn't a third country that will acknowledge them and accept them? So what if they end up in a detention facility indefinitely? Who's paying for that? It's the taxpayers. It's you. It's me and you, right? So how can we allow that to happen? How many of our undocumented immigrant youth are going to end up in the same situation as me? I know a handful of former undocumented youth who are now adults who have been undocumented for over 20 years of their lives. And so the psychological ramifications are even worse, because you're forced to blame someone. You're forced to blame your parents for neglecting you. And think about how hard that could be, and the trauma that is induced in someone who has to go back into their history, into their past, and excavate every ghost that they try to bury, and deal with that in the courtroom, and be subject to scrutiny in the courtroom. And now it's not just in the courtroom, it's in the public eye. So this is, you know, why I talk about my case and my situation. Now, my situation ended up being very fortunate, because I got my permanent resident card, my green card, and then 5 years later, I was able to apply for U.S. citizenship. So in 2012, I became a U.S. citizen, and I am so grateful for it. Now, I ask myself, where was God in my situation? Where did God show up in this conversation around immigration? Well, God showed up in so many ways. Well, in one way, God showed up because I felt and I believe that God hated me and was punishing me throughout my life. And in the immigration process, and in the process of, you know, trying to search, you know, and figure out what my path to citizen was or could be, I learned that God loved me so much, because it was one one inexplicable happenstance after another. Even today, when I try to explain my story of going from being an undocumented immigrant orphan to the woman that I am before you, I can't even believe it. So that's one way. God showed up as a miracle and as a testimony. I am a testimony for many others. So that's the first. The second is God gave me more than I ever could imagine, right? That's how he showed up. I am reminded of the story of Job, right? In the Old Testament. My mother used to tell me that story like the back of her hand. I knew that story so well. It was the story of a man who really, really believed in God and loved God and lost so much, but was given tenfold, after he went through his ordeal and his atrocities. And so I feel that I'm living the life of Job. I went from not having a family, not having a mother and a father, to, in 2012, having my biological father, who I thought was dead, find me through social media, find me through LinkedIn. So not only did I gain him as a father, but my benefactor, the man that, paid my way through boarding school, I regard him as a father as well. And I will forever be indebted to my stepfather, who taught me so much, who gave me the discipline to take care of myself and make education my number one priority in the midst of everything that was going on. And that's how I was able to put myself through college and then graduate school and come out of all of it and with a higher degree, a master's degree, and be able to provide for myself and fend for myself. So that's the second way that God showed up, is giving me more than I could ask for, giving me a family, giving me fathers, and giving me the opportunity to go back into my past. I was forced to excavate my past, but in that process, I got the opportunity to heal. I got an opportunity to walk my mother's footsteps, learn who she was, understand her beyond the enigma that she was when she was alive. So I got the opportunity to learn who she was, to heal every wound, every burn, every scar that I carried with me. I sit before you today as one of the most joyful individuals. I promise you. I have there's nothing that I haven't dealt with, that I haven't explored. That's why I can share my story with you. I can be an open book because I feel tremendous healing every time I share. I have experienced healing through my pain. And so those are the three ways that God has showed up for me in this immigration conversation, in my immigration conversation. How has God showed up in the universal immigration conversation? Well, what I see today is so much empathy and understanding, that we have, that all of us, that the community has for undocumented immigrants. People are allies for undocumented immigrants. We have relabeled the term we've gone from illegal immigrants to undocumented immigrants because there's a sensitivity. It's also allowed us to question our humanity. And when we begin to question and explore our humanity, we begin to heal ourselves. We begin to heal different communities, not just the undocumented communities, but all the other communities that are dislocated. We begin to heal those communities by exploring them, by understanding them as it relates to our own situations, our own struggles. And so in that, God is great, God is good, and God has shown up. And I just can't wait to see where we go from here in the conversation of immigration. And so with that, I thank you so much